understand this because it's really important. These aren't just self-critical thoughts, because they don't even have to be about you. They're learned beliefs about yourself and your capabilities or your circumstances, about what other people will think or do based on your actions, or what is socially acceptable, or even about life in general and how the world works. So I'm going to throw something out there. What if the biggest thing holding you back isn't a lack of discipline, opportunity, or talent, but an invisible chain in your mind forged by beliefs you didn't even choose and maybe aren't even aware that you're carrying around? Many of us are constantly compelled to learn more, strive more, acquire more. And don't get me wrong, it's never a bad idea to work towards developing a new skill or improving our physical health or learning new things or figuring out a new routine that's going to improve our emotional or mental health. But what if the secret to being happier, more content, and maybe even to your next breakthrough wasn't necessarily those things? What if it wasn't about adding more? What if it was slowly jettisoning some? This week, I want to talk about the radical act of unlearning and shedding some of the mental baggage and barriers that have been holding us back and limiting our potential. I'm talking about self-limiting beliefs. Beliefs like, I'm not good enough. I'll never be able to do that. I've always been this way. It's too late for me. This week, we're talking about the art of unlearning, the science-backed process of gently letting go of the internalized truths that were never really true and starting to move forward towards our dreams. So let's dig into that and break some chains. You know how life throws us curveballs? Nobody gets through this journey of life without a few storms. Welcome to Transformative Journeys. I'm your host, Johanna LaRue. Each week, I'll share my thoughts and insights and dig into strategies that can empower you to rediscover yourself, learn about transforming pain into power, building confidence to navigate life's challenges, and cultivating a life of meaning and joy. Join me on this journey of exploration and transformation. Welcome back to Transformative Journeys with Johanna. And of course, this is Johanna. And of course, we're going to be talking about something at least mildly uncomfortable for some people and downright panic-inducing for others today. Because that's what I love to do. Take my own demons, rip them apart with the sword of neuroscience, tame them with a bit of psychology and common sense, and then share my messy truths with you in the hope that, at best, it helps you step forward with more courage, or at worst, leaves you with food for thought. So, what are limiting beliefs? Let's start with a hard truth. One that's as true for every one of you as it is for me. Because nobody, and I mean nobody, has 100% self-confidence 100% of the time. We all walk through the world with internal scripts running in the background. Some of them are good scripts that affirm things we feel good about ourselves. Maybe you're a good cook and you know it. Maybe you're highly organized and feel confident in that area. Maybe you can make green things grow well, so you know you have a green thumb. You get the idea, right? But many of our internal scripts are either outright or insidiously undermining our capabilities and our belief about our own potential. These Oscar-winning scripts that were usually originally written by someone else quietly, consistently shape how we see ourselves and what we believe is possible for us, because we've woven them into our inner narrative and we've learned to own them. Psychology calls these limiting beliefs, negative, fear-based self-perceptions or stories that we tell ourselves about our identity, about the world, or about what's possible that have become rigid assumptions about who we are, what we can or can't do, and how the world works. And here's the important and the insidious part. They can prevent us from achieving our goals or being as happy as we could be. Here's the problem, though. They often sound like truth because they've been playing so long in our heads. I'm not really a numbers person. Guilty as charged on that one. I don't have the skills, education, experience to do fill in the blank with whatever you want. People like me don't get to do that. I'm not a creative person. I can't do fill in the blank. I always mess things up. I'm too old to do that. And understand this because it's really important. These aren't just self-critical thoughts, because they don't even have to be about you. They're learned beliefs about yourself and your capabilities or your circumstances, about what other people will think or do based on your actions, or what is socially acceptable, or even about life in general and how the world works. And they're often seeded in early childhood. They're hand-me-downs from family dynamics, from school systems, from community, from culture, and even emotionally charged one-off failures that branded us with shame. Hello, teacher, who humiliated me during that elementary school class multiplication table flashcard exercise. They get nurtured as teens when image is everything to us. And by adulthood, they've taken up residence and they're living rent-free in our heads forever. Maybe. So they sort of become these kind of self-fulfilling prophecies. But my question is, do they have to? Just because a belief feels familiar or even comfortably uncomfortable doesn't mean it's true. Dr. Wayne Dyer says the only limits you have are the limits you believe. You guys know I love neuroscience, so let's quickly dive into some of the brain science around this for a minute. Our brains constantly scan our environment for patterns and ways to reduce uncertainty and anxiety. And God knows they're not always successful at reducing uncertainty and anxiety, but anyways. So then they create these shortcuts in our neurocircuitry to embed that information so it's easily retrievable in the future. This is part of what science calls predictive coding. It's our brain's way of anticipating and preparing for outcomes based on previous life experiences. And there's a cute little phrase I see all the time in the research articles I read, and I actually just heard it again in a podcast I was listening to on my lunch break today. And it's neurons that fire together, wire together, which sort of means that the more often these beliefs about ourselves get activated, repeated in our heads, I'm not good at that, that never works for me, the harder they get baked into our neural wiring. So we believe them even more. And the vicious cycle just goes on, becoming what's called a cognitive schema. And that is profound and persistent ways of thinking and feeling about the world and ourselves that filter how we interpret new situations that come up. Instead of seeing something that didn't go as we'd hoped as data to help us do better next time, we actually see it as more confirmation of that limiting belief. It's a bit like putting on a pair of those solar sunglasses that you don't realize you're wearing. Everything gets filtered through that tiny hole in the lens. But I bring tidings of joy, my friends. Thanks to neuroplasticity, we can unlearn those beliefs and we can create new, more empowering self-beliefs for ourselves. But it takes intention. It takes some determination and work, and it also takes some self-compassion. So why is it so hard to let go of these inner narratives, even if we know better? If you've ever tried to talk yourself out of a limiting belief using something like a mantra and failed, you're not alone. Our beliefs don't just live in the rational part of our brains. They're stored in our bodies too. And that's not woo-woo, that's science. Our beliefs carry emotional weight too. Our brain wires them to feel like safety, like protection. Because I was made to feel so stupid and ashamed for making mistakes in math, I can avoid those feelings by telling myself that I'm not good at math. And it's better left to someone more capable than me because struggling with math makes me feel stupid and incompetent. So yes, I'm talking about me again because it's such a simple and yet powerful example of a limiting belief that I still struggle with at 59 years old. And am I bad at math? Of course not. I'm very good at some math, perfectly competent at other parts of math, don't have a clue about some math because I never actually studied it in school, and suck at times tables. Hello, PTSD. That's not bad at math or not a numbers person. That, my friends, is a limiting belief in action. Some limiting beliefs can create this whole internal conflict between what we want or desire and the patterns like procrastination, avoidance, sadness, and anger that prevents us from pursuing goals, from taking risks, or from seeing new possibilities that can help us to achieve or fulfill those goals. Unlearning takes work, but it is possible. If some of what I've said in this episode has made you squirm a little, or if you said to yourself, "Holy shit, that's me," you are not alone, but you are in the right place, because there is a planet full of people who have no idea they're walking around with internal fairy tales playing in their heads. I can't rewrite yours for you. I'm still working on my own, but I do have some tools that can help soothe some of the anxiety that happens during this kind of work. The Bounce Back Blueprint is a free resource to help you reclaim your footing around some of these hard things that we're working on. The Essential Resiliency Toolkit offers grounding practices, journaling prompts, reframe strategies, and of course, every episode in this podcast is another layer in the journey. You can find them all at transformativejourneys.ca/Johanna's Toolboxes, and I'll put a link in the show notes. Okay, so let's talk now about what unlearning actually looks like in practice. Many of our limiting beliefs follow a sort of framework of I'm not, I can't, I don't, or I shouldn't. They're that nagging little voice in our heads that makes us stumble when we want to try something spontaneous or something big. Things like, I can't do public speaking. I don't have the education or experience. I shouldn't say anything because I'll rock the boat. I'm not athletic. I don't deserve this praise. I'm not worthy because I got this by pure luck. Someone, whoever, says I've always been very nervous or too outspoken or overconfident. Any of these ring a bell or make you wince? Yeah, I see you there, imposter syndrome, and I've got my sword of neuroscience out of its scabbard. And even if I don't ever completely defeat you, I will cut you down to size. Anyways, do you want a truth bomb? All these convictions that we have are beliefs that could have been planted as far back as when we were in diapers, and we've been nobly holding on as if they were gospel. Now for the art of unlearning and some practical tools to help us get started, because yes, I absolutely am a work in progress here. I'll dig a little deeper into actual strategies and tools to really help us begin the process of releasing limiting beliefs in a minute, but here's a short, sort of high-level overview of the process to start. The first thing we need to do is to identify the limiting belief. Like anything, if you want to start to fix something, you need to name the problem, or problems in my case for sure. And remember, for this little part of the exercise, it's not about tackling every one of them all at once or right away. It's a self-awareness exercise that will help us determine what we want to explore further, what's having the most immediate impact on our life and our happiness, and then determining which one we want to work on slaying first. So grab a piece of pen and a paper and start writing out your biggest limiting beliefs. It's incredible how tough we can really be on ourselves. We aren't actually always aware of or recognize our limiting beliefs or thoughts. So it can even be helpful to keep a little notebook in your pocket or a thought journal for a little while. And that way, when we have a self-limiting thought, we can jot it down so that we can explore it later. Next, we need to identify the lie. Our limiting beliefs are based on a lie. So ask yourself, is this belief always true? Like always? And all of it? Then talk it out with yourself. Can I identify where this belief came from? Is it impacting my life or my happiness? And do I want to keep carrying it? Is my limiting belief closer to fact, or have I made it an excuse? Is it rooted in fear, shame, rejection, or some other emotion? And what is some evidence that contradicts that belief? Now it's time to decide on what real belief we want to replace that limiting belief with. And this is where neuroscience really comes to life, because reframing our limiting beliefs, consistently replacing them with a real truth-centered belief, and actually practicing by doing things that prove that that old belief was a lie, rewires that predictive coding we talked about earlier and rewires that cognitive schema, not just planting that new belief, but nurturing it to help it thrive and grow. And cognitive behavioral therapy calls this practice cognitive restructuring, where you're identifying, challenging, and replacing unhelpful thoughts with more accurate ones. It's a little bit affirmations and a little of the harder work of putting those affirmations into real life practice. So, shall we dig into some real strategies to use as we go through this stuff that I covered up in the overview? So, first is journaling it out. And I know some people are journalers, some people aren't, and you don't have to be a journaler to journal something out. You don't have to be one of those people who likes to sit down and, write 5 pages of their thoughts every evening before they go to bed, or, one of those really super organized, wonderful people who can get up early enough in the morning to do a journal entry before they get ready for work. Goodness knows that's not me. Whether you sit down and do a sort of full exercise by listing and examining a bunch of limiting beliefs at once, or you make a note of them as they come along in that little notebook and go back to do some work on challenging them a little later, journaling your thoughts out is a powerful practice to help us figure out the belief, figure out its source, and then figure out how best for you, or in my case for me, to reframe it. So say you came up with the limiting belief, I'm terrible at public speaking. And yes, I'm going to dip into the very deep well of past experience here. This is definitely one I had to slay the demons about when I started public speaking for Threads of Life, to advocate for safer workplace cultures and the importance of workplace injury prevention. Not only did I have to slay that demon in order to speak in front of large groups of strangers, but I had to do it with the constant anxiety around the emotional content of my story and message. So back to that thought. I'm a terrible public speaker. I doubt many public speakers don't have this one, at least early in the game. Then the thought gets amplified. I always stumble on my words. I have to look at my notes. I don't look like those famous people in the infomercials, and people are going to judge me badly. I'm an introvert, and that whole public speaking exercise in grade 5 or 6, where we had to write something and then memorize it and stay in front of the entire class, was excruciating for me. I truly don't enjoy being in large groups of people, and although I thoroughly enjoy real conversations, whether it's with people I know or even strangers, I abhor meaningless small talk. And here I am, signing up to be a friggin' public speaker, voluntarily and unpaid. Like, Jesus. Personally, I don't really buy into the positive affirmation idea for this one. Telling myself I'm a confident and articulate public speaker, I express myself with clarity, and I captivate my audience. But that's just me and my situation. So if it works for you, awesome, do it. I do, however, have 2 strategies that work for me. The first is reminding myself that sometimes it's the really uncomfortable things that matter in a positive way the most. Telling myself that 95% of the people in the room wouldn't have the guts to do what I do and aren't hearing my stammers and fumbles. They're hearing my story and maybe even admiring me for having the courage to do it. So take that, shame demon. And the third and most powerful one is kind of funny. I learned something that forever changed the way I experience public speaking when I started really researching, reading, and learning about emotional awareness and emotional intelligence. Anxiousness and excitement actually elicit the same sensations in our bodies. Our brain kind of registers them the same way. So I began to cognitively reframe, like literally talking to myself, when I'm getting ready to do a presentation. When I start to feel the usual anxiety begin to kick in, like, yes, every single fucking time, I literally tell myself, what you are feeling is excitement. You know your message is impactful and most people respect you for sharing. You were excited because you were making a difference. Literally works every time. Do I have the same sensations? The shaking hands, the ishy feeling in my stomach, the sweaty armpits? 100%. Does it allow me to walk up onto the stage and forward in life, really, with a little more confidence? 1000%. All right, so the next is mindfulness and a name the thought practice. This involves distancing yourself from the thought, thereby taking away its power. When you have a self-limiting thought, instead of assimilating that thought, this didn't work, I made a mistake equals I'm a failure, learn to observe it and identify it for what it is. I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. You can then go on to challenge it a bit. Is that thought accurate and factual? Or am I making a negative association between what happened and me personally? Is this situation, outcome, mistake really as bad as I'm making it out to be? Or even, what is something I've learned from what just happened? It takes a bit of time to get used to doing, and it's hard to catch every single self-limiting thought that pops into our head. But over time, with practice, you can rewire those circuits and improve your self-confidence. The next one is called the rubber band technique. And this one's used for a number of things in cognitive behavioral therapy. And its aim really is to reduce unwanted behaviors or thoughts by bringing them to our attention physically or by attaching a negative consequence to it. And the idea here isn't to cause yourself pain. It's to give you a quick way to stop the thought in its tracks, to remind you to immediately reframe it and condition you to have fewer of the negative thoughts in the future. And it's pretty simple. You just wear a rubber band on your wrist, and I prefer those wrapped elastic bands most girls to use to tie their ponytails because you have to snap those pretty darn hard for them to actually hurt. And I find they both don't break as easily and don't get caught in my sleeves as much. But anyways, it should be tight enough that it doesn't slip and fall off, but not so tight that it's uncomfortable or cuts off your circulation. You really shouldn't notice it on your wrist most of the time. When you notice a negative thought or a self-limiting thought, give the rubber band a ping. The physical action and sensation should halt the thought, at which time you take just a second or two to reframe the thought. Use your affirmation mantra or just even rewrite that thought in your head. The next one I'm going to talk about is called visualization and rehearsal. And I'm going to say this again and again, and likely again. Strategies or tools like visualization are not fluffy, metaphysical, woo-woo stuff aimed at people who dance with their cat under the full moon or live in communes on the West Coast. Advances in cognitive neuroscience, which includes functional brain imaging, MRIs, show that mental imagery makes use of many of the same neural pathways and areas in our brain as actually experiencing, like seeing, feeling, or doing something. Imagery of emotional events can activate our automatic nervous system and our amygdala in similar ways to actually experiencing, leading to physiological changes. So changes in our bodies. For example, imagining a threatening or frightening event can cause an increase in our heart rate, our breathing rate, and our skin temperature. Think about the last time you had a nightmare or a vivid dream. You weren't actually physically experiencing the event in your dream. They were all going on in your imagination in your head. But you woke up with your heart racing. You might have woken up feeling scared and maybe sweating a little. So the trick is that it's not about just sort of thinking about it or saying it to ourselves like a mantra. It's vividly picturing yourself living in a way that's in line with the new belief. Kind of like creating a high-resolution video of it in your head that actually helps our brain rehearse and solidify that shift. How would you move through the world and behave if you truly believed you are, you can, and you do, instead of those aren'ts, can'ts, and don'ts? This isn't magic. It's neuroscience, and it unlocks something pretty powerful, because when we start to believe we are, we can, and we do, we start to notice more and more things that support those beliefs about ourselves. It's a bit like taking off a blinder and being able to see the possibilities that you didn't realize were there before. And finally, act. Last but not least, dreaming and visualizing will only get you so far if you don't act on them. It's time to be a little bit brave and even find small ways to take a little bit of uncomfortable action. Because with every tiny successful action that you take that contradicts that limiting belief, you're removing a link from that chain in your mind. And don't get me wrong, not every action might be successful, and that might feel kind of shitty. But whatever you do, don't let it hold you back from taking those tiny steps forwards. Failure's a part of life, and accepting that with a what did I learn from that growth mindset, instead of using it to reaffirm your limiting beliefs, is an important, really important part of that process. But as much as I love mantras to help me take that first step, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Actions speak way louder than words. All right. So if you have a notebook or paper handy, today I'm going to leave you with these prompts to consider this week, whether you actually journal them out or just take them with you on your next walk. Make it kind, as always, and ask yourself, what's one belief I've carried for years that I now suspect might not be true? Where do I think that belief came from? If I could rewrite that belief into something more empowering, what would it sound like? This week we talked about limiting beliefs, what they are, where they come from, why it can be so difficult to let them go, and how you can start to identify yours and begin to free yourself from them. As we wrap up, I want you to remember, unlearning and releasing those limiting beliefs isn't erasing who you are. And it's not a one-time fix. It's a lifelong practice. Our brains are hardwired to try and protect us. So every experience, every so-called failure has the potential to act as a link being added to that invisible chain in our minds. Releasing our limiting beliefs isn't about denying the pain or the discomfort of those events, or pretending that we aren't hurt, scared, or uncertain. It's about breaking old habits, embracing a growth mindset, and gaining a better understanding of ourselves. And it's never too late to rewrite our beliefs to ones that are more empowering, ones that are more in line with who we want to be instead of who others want us to be, and beliefs that help us overcome obstacles and build our resilience. Don't forget, for more practical help to help you focus on and begin to honor your right to honor who you are, including setting boundaries, make sure you grab my bounce back blueprint at transformativejourneys.ca or just scroll down to the link in the show notes. Thanks so much for being here with me today. If this episode stirred something in you, maybe challenged an old belief or cracked the door open a little to a new one, I'd love to hear about it. You can find me over on Instagram at transformativejourneys.johanna. And just as important, share this with someone else who needs to hear it. Your support helps me keep creating free tools and having honest conversations, because no matter how much you love what you're doing, sometimes it takes a whole lot of metaphysical duct tape to hold it all together. And if you'd like to toss a little love into the duct tape fund, you can now support the podcast at buymeacoffee.com. I'll put a link in the show notes. And lastly, you know that hitting that subscribe button and tapping the bell or like or whatever it is on your platform helps my show get noticed, right? So I'll make you a deal. You tap it and I'll keep dropping the best of what's in my heart and soul so we can keep learning together. Until next week, this is Johanna reminding you that it doesn't matter if you fall. What matters is how well you bounce. This is Transformative Journeys. See you next time. Just wanted to throw in a disclaimer. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and should not replace the advice of a medical or mental health expert. I'm not a licensed counselor or a therapist, just a human with a mic and a story of growth and resilience. No degree, no fancy letters after my name. I'm a full-time student at the School of Hard Knocks, University of Life, where I figure I'll graduate when I take my last breath. In other words, I'm just Johanna, a fellow human being on my journey through this thing called life, and your concierge on this transformative journey.